Hello! Today I wanted to talk about Savage Warriors from 1995 for MS-DOS, platform I'm mostly talking about on my channel. And this is an interesting game. It was not very successful as far as I know. It had mixed reviews. Some magazines were really praising the game while others were not so much convinced. The first thing you will probably notice about the game are its graphics, which look very unique because it uses voxel graphics for its characters, giving them a 3D look and having very smooth animation. On the downside, the characters are a bit blocky and do not mesh perfectly with the hand-drawn backgrounds, but at least in my personal opinion, it still looks really cool. Many people were complaining though at that time because many fighting games have transitioned to 3D, so the 2D look seemed a bit outdated at the time. An interesting feature regarding the voxel technique is that you can view the characters obviously from every angle. So there's a replay feature after each fight where you can turn the camera and look at the characters from each angle, which is then also a bit weird because obviously the hand-drawn backgrounds can't be displayed in that mode, but sometimes you have interactive parts in the background where you can hang from the ceiling or something like that, but if you watch that in the replay you're suddenly hanging mid-air. And another feature that's a bit hidden is that you can switch between two different camera angles in the game. One that's a bit more from the top and one that's just plain from the side. And they switch out the 2D backgrounds for that, so every arena that you fight in has two different versions. I think that's rather peculiar, and I wonder if they originally had planned to go full 3D with the game, but then maybe hit some wall performance-wise, or they were just not able to pull it off. There's also an option to switch to an SVGA mode, but it doesn't really increase the resolution of the combat area because the window just gets smaller and it displays more information about the fight on the outer borders. Still, I feel it looks a bit better because, yeah, the pixels are just smaller and it's not that apparent. The resolution is so low. Also, I think it's kind of handy to actually see the health of the fighters so you know what's going on. One aspect that's really annoying about that is that the game doesn't remember which mode you have. So each time you start the combat, you have first switch to SVGA, and then if you want to switch to top-down, you also have to do that every time again. So in general, the game feels a bit rushed. It lacks a bit of polish. And you get the feeling that they were running out of time. They had something interesting there, but they were not really able to pull it off. Now, enough talking about the graphics. Let's get to the bread and butter, the gameplay. Yeah, and that's not really great. It's quite simple. You have kicks and you have punches. You can jump and obviously you can move your character, so it's really your very basic moveset. Every character has 3 special attacks, but they are not that interesting, and you have special attack energy that you can increase if you're hitting your enemy. The game is a bit on the slower side, but it's still okay. The characters feel at least somewhat responsive, but you never really get a full feeling of control over the character. I mean, as a disclaimer, I have to say I'm definitely not a fighting game expert or anything, so probably other people have different experiences with the game. In my humble opinion, it feels fine, you can do some stuff, but it gets boring quite quickly, also because the characters don't feel so different and it doesn't really feel that it makes a big difference which moves you're really pulling off. Oftentimes it just gets down to button mashing. The main downside of the game is definitely its AI if you're playing single player. If you're playing on a lower difficulty, then the AI will just cower in a corner and almost do nothing, which is very boring. It will block most of your hits, so it just takes a long time, and that's not really interesting. But then when you fight against the final boss, suddenly the difficulty spikes extremely. I'm not sure if the difficulty level even works for the last boss, or if he's always that strong no matter what you select there, but it's just night and day. And if you're playing on a higher difficulty, there's always this feeling that the character just switches between being completely defensive and not doing anything, and then suddenly he throws out a long combo that is so fast that you oftentimes simply can't do anything about it. The different characters that you come up against also use a bit different tactics, so yes, there's a difference, they don't all feel the same, but that's also not very well balanced, so some characters are very easy while others are a lot harder to defeat. I know this sounds all very negative, but I have to give it to the game that the core mechanics kind of work. So, for example, if you're doing a special move, your opponent can interrupt it if he is able to hit you while you're doing your animation, so there's at least some kind of strategy involved. And as I mentioned before, you can sometimes interact with the background, so you can hang from ledges and then kick, but I never felt that this was worth it, so I'm not sure if this has any use at all. Some characters also have weapons, though it's a bit disappointing that if they lose their weapon, you can't pick them up and hit them with their own weapon. Another big downside in my book is that there are no fatalities, which is very sad because I could imagine that the voxel engine could display quite some gore and quite some cool effects there, but nope, they don't exist, which also seems to be down to the game being rather rushed. Now, if you liked the video so far, please consider giving it a like, and if you want to see more retro video games in the future, then maybe just subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to get notified when a new video is up. And then there obviously is the 2-player mode, which as far as I remember worked quite fine. I think I played it quite a lot with my friends, but unfortunately for this video I was not able to invite someone over, so I have no idea if that memory is correct. But it's cool because you can select the stages instead of having to play through each and every one of them, and you can just beat up your friend, and probably that's more interesting than the very strange and boring AI you can fight against. Also in the 2-player mode there are some secret characters that you can unlock that are rather funny. Unfortunately they don't have any special move, so again it feels a bit rushed here as well. One thing I do remember quite fondly is that all the background graphics are stored in the PCX format, which was rather common back then, and I had a program which was able to load and save those graphics. So one thing I loved to do was add a few Easter eggs, small details to the backgrounds, and then when playing against my friends, asking them if they can find them or see if they even notice what I have changed. So one example, I would change the water and turn it into blood and add gore and other stuff on the background, and I really love doing that. The soundtrack is really cool, I have to admit. I really enjoyed that. It really fits the over-the-top atmosphere of the game. But I can't say that for the sound effects. They often seem very repetitive, and there's really not a lot of presentation around the game. So if you win a fight, there's not a big celebration or special effects, and well, it's mostly one animation when you lose that your character portrait gets burned, and there's a short cutscene when you start to fight against the final boss. But other than that, it feels a bit lackluster. So would I recommend playing the game today? Well, maybe just checking out all the different characters that all have, in my mind, quite unique and cool designs, and also check out all the different arenas, which, well, they play the same, but they look very pretty in my opinion. One bigger issue is that the game runs very poorly, at least on my PC. I tried 3 different versions of DOSBox, all different settings, and at the beginning it was all fine, but the game just becomes slower and slower, to the point where you can see in the video here it's really completely unplayable. Sometimes it gets faster again and it recovers, but yeah, I'm not sure if it's down to my PC configuration in any way, or if there's a bug maybe in the game or in DOSBox or some memory leak, but yeah, that's really unfortunate. I hope you enjoyed looking back at Savage Warriors. I had a great time replaying it, even though it's not the greatest game in the world, but I still think that it's one that should be remembered for everything it does differently and in a unique way. And with that, see ya!